It's not our job to make our children happy. We actually, again, cannot control someone else's feelings and emotions. We can influence them, but we cannot control them. And so really, if our only goal is to keep our child happy, that's how we fall into the cycle of permissive parenting, because we then give the child all of the power and they are in control.
Welcome. You're listening to the Healthy Parenting Handbook podcast. This is just what we all said we needed when we first became parents. All the time for me in my head, I was like, where is the handbook for this job? I'm your host, Katie Kimball from Kids Cook Real Food, and I bring together experts in the fields of health, parenting, nutrition, and more to give you the information you need to raise truly healthy, independent future adults. Parenting is the toughest and the most rewarding job in the world. Thank you for joining me to consult this Healthy Parenting Handbook, your guide to raising kids intentionally. Friends, if you would leave an honest review out there, that helps other people find this great information. Apple Podcasts is a great place, or wherever you listen. My guest today is an expert in toddler parenting. And check this out. If you are listening on the go and you can't take notes because, I don't know, who has time for that as a parent? Please check out our brand new Healthy Parenting Handbook one-pagers. This is a quick summary of the points that the guest makes, so you can literally print your own Healthy Parenting Handbook one page at a time. Or, hello, Katie, it's the digital age. You can just take a quick look to remember what someone said that you listened to while you were folding laundry or on a walk. These are all in one document. They're available to all my email subscribers, so please go to kidscookrealfood.com/handbook to get them all. Now, who are we hearing from today? Devon Kuntzman is a powerhouse in modern parenting, and she's on a mission to dispel the myth that toddlerhood is a terrible stage. Known as the original toddler parenting coach on Instagram and trusted by over 1 million parents and caregivers worldwide, she's dedicated to changing the narrative around toddlerhood. Through her Transforming Toddlerhood, she's built a vibrant and close-knit community of parents and offers a lifeline of science-based, easy-to-implement tools, from courses to workshops and an annual conference that will help parents navigate tantrums, power struggles, and emotional development with confidence and joy. If you are on Instagram, you must right now go to Transforming Toddlerhood and follow Devon. Her sound bites of wisdom are absolutely perfect. This is a little bit of a long interview because I couldn't stop adding questions to the questions that I had prepared because Devon has such a wealth of knowledge. The depth and breadth of her expertise is amazing. And whether you have toddlers or not, to be honest, most of this advice applies also to other aspects of parenting. Let's have a listen. Devon, thank you for being here. I had so much fun digging into your content because I'm a good 7 years away from the toddler parenting phase. It's been a while. And I just remember those days fondly, mostly. But that's your goal, right? You want people to feel fond about their toddlers in the moment, not just in retrospect.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's going to be challenging moments, and it's also a critical and, dare I say, magical developmental period.
How did you become this toddler parenting coach? And personally, I'm super curious because I know your one son is only 3. Mm-hmm. Were you doing this before you had kids?
Yeah. Absolutely. So I have a degree in psychology with a focus in child development. I'm also an ICF certified coach. And for many, many years, I had a whole career as a nanny for high profile families all over the world. And so I worked with a lot of families, different dynamics, different children, and got a firsthand experience of just working day in and day out with all different types of children with different needs, different personalities, and temperaments. And one thing that I started to notice, two things. One thing I noticed is that between parents and their toddlers, there was a lot of miscommunication moments where toddlers were upset and crying and parents were getting really frustrated and taking the crying as they were doing something wrong or there was something wrong or bad with their child, when those tears and that crying was trying to communicate something else to the parent, whether it was a need for connection or just tired or whatever it might be. So I started to really realize all behavior is communication, which really changed my experience of working with toddlers firsthand, because for a long time, especially in a high pressure environment where there's a lot of pressure for kids to, act a certain way, I would think, oh, okay, so this toddler's having a good behavior, so I'm doing a good job. And then if they quote unquote had bad behavior, then I was doing a bad job. And so when I finally realized that all behavior is communication and started to get curious about what is beneath the behavior and what it's communicating, everything started to change. And then I ended up founding Transforming Toddlerhood in 2018 with the goal to really dispel the myth that toddlerhood is terrible and empower parents with positive, effective, developmentally appropriate parenting tools and strategies.
I love that you had such unique and varied experience before you were a mom, because that's what I mean. I'm going, okay, like her oldest is 3. But yet I could feel that you'd been doing it. It felt like you've been doing it longer.
Yes.
I'm still going to ask the question, even though I do believe that nannies, especially nannies who travel with families, like you are parenting for sure. When you became a mom of your own child, did it change your coaching at all?
Yes. So I would say one of the biggest things that changed is like the understanding and like level and depth of empathy. And what I mean by that is that when you are with your own child, that there is like a deeper level of emotional pull that creeps in just about every way we might interact with a child, right? And so like sometimes hearing your child cry is harder than hearing someone else's child cry because we make it mean a lot of different things, right? Or, just different like moments where I love my child so much. And so I can see moments where it would be easier to just be more permissive, right? Versus whenever, as a nanny, I could think a little bit more objective and logically in certain moments than I can with my own child. But what is so beautiful is that even with my own child, I faced other challenges and situations that I still had yet to face, even with the whole other toddlers that I'd taken care of, so many different families I'd worked with. And that just goes to show every child is truly unique. And parents who have more than one kid know that, sometimes even if you're parenting your third toddler, it can feel completely different than the first two because of that uniqueness.
So true. And your experience is gold because you got to have that objective perspective. And yet, like, unlike a teacher who has 5 or 10 or 15 toddlers at a time, you had that objectivity in the home. And then now you have the empathy of being a fellow parent. Love that so much.
Yeah.
My daughter actually works in a daycare. So she's 17. And I believe the kids she works with are 12 to 18 months. So they're right in that like toddlerhood. They're just starting to talk. And she will often come home and say, oh, like they just weren't listening today. Like it was just a bad day. The kids weren't listening. And my gut is kind of saying, I don't think that's the right approach. This doesn't quite feel right. But my 17-year-old does not want to hear what I have to say. So I don't say anything. But what would you say to a parent who feels that gut reaction? Like, oh, my toddler's just not listening.
Yes. Well, this is true for toddlerhood, both young toddlers ages 1 and 2 and older toddlers ages 3 and 4, but especially 12 to 18 months when little ones are really entering toddlerhood for the first time and starting to realize they are not an extension of their parents and caregivers, but they are in fact their own separate person and individual. So they're really developing a sense of self for the first time. They're not going to listen. Why? Because toddlers are not wired to listen. They are wired to exert their will, to experiment, to explore, because they're trying to become their own person for the very first time. However, for us as parents, we also relate to babies as an extension of ourselves. So when we have a toddler that has their own agenda for the very first time, it can be really hard and a little confusing to us because during infancy, we have this illusion of control. But then when toddlers start to have their own agenda, that illusion of control just gets knocked right down. And it can feel very frustrating to start realizing, oh, you mean I wasn't actually in control? That was just an illusion. It can be very, very disconcerting. And when we're going through that process of figuring that out, it can become very frustrating as we're trying to find our footing. If we're not in control, how do we be in charge? How do we create influence? And that will then in turn create connection and cooperation.
That's fascinating to hear that toddlers are not wired to listen. So tell me some other facts about toddlers that parents would often miss, like game changers that'll be just, light bulbs turning on when people realize a little more about the little tiny person in their house.
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of like myths or unrealistic expectations that parents have is that like toddlers should know how to share. But in fact, toddlerhood is a very egocentric developmental period where they think everything is for them and about them. That's why you hear a lot of me and mine. So sharing is not like developmentally wired for toddlers. Same with impulse control. The part of the brain that is responsible for impulse control is not very developed in toddlerhood. So parents think that toddlers should be able to resist running off or not grabbing something from the shelf at a store, when toddlers really are not wired to be able to do that yet. And so that's where we start feeling frustrated, like, oh, they're not listening to me. And so also I would say in toddlerhood that parents generally underestimate a toddler's physical abilities. So they'll end up doing things for toddlers that they're actually capable of doing, like maybe getting dressed or pulling up a blanket on their bed or something like that, clearing the table. But then they overestimate their emotional capabilities. So they expect them to not have a tantrum or get upset when something doesn't go their way, thinking that they could control whether or not they have an emotional outburst when things don't go their way.
I think parents actually underestimate at many stages the physical abilities, because that's so fascinating. Like that's exactly what I teach parents about cooking, especially as kids are moving into like their elementary years. We radically underestimate what they can do in the kitchen.
Yes.
And that's what an interesting dichotomy of we underestimate their physical abilities, but we overestimate their emotional abilities. Is that because the brain is developing at different rates in toddlerhood?
Yes. And the toddlers reach all of these gross physical milestones so fast. They're walking, then they're running, then they're jumping, then they're doing this. And so and then also they're starting to talk. And so when you have someone who's talking and starting to like almost like debate things with you or have their own ideas, you start to think, oh, they're pretty mature. But really, just because they're starting to talk doesn't mean they have the emotional maturity and the impulse control that they need. And what's interesting, though, is we see toddlers, doing all these physical things, but we forget that can translate into things that make a difference. Something I talk about a lot is like raising a helper. That if you want a 5, 6, 7-year-old that, is a team player in the home and that will, support the family in doing household tasks, then inviting your child in when they're 1, 2, and 3 years old, when they're actually interested in it, is what's going to allow you to raise a helper. And that's another way that we kind of underestimate a child's physical abilities, where like we see them, walking and running and jumping, but we forget to invite them in to maybe help like take a small trash bag out of a trash can, or to sweep up something with like a little hand broom or things of that nature.
We are like so on the same page. It is out of this world. In fact, fun story. We had a nanny when my youngest was very young, just for a couple days a week, because I work at home, right? Flexible. And she would learn some things from me about, what we expected of our kids and teaching them to cook and to do household tasks. And so then when she moved on to her next fancy nanny fam, 5 days a week, and she had toddler twins, I think they were 18 months at the time. And she would use what she'd learned in our house, so that they were responsible for moving wet clothing from the washer to the dryer, for example. And they'd literally throw a fit if she did it while they were napping. But yet, this part's fascinating to me, if she was ever invited for dinner, the parents acted like sort of maybe your average American parent. They didn't expect their kids to do anything. And these toddlers acted completely helpless, like wet noodles in front of their parents. And, our dear nanny was like, what? They are different people, because they were, strongly participating when she was giving them that opportunity. So that to me is like the best story of like, you have to raise your expectations.
Yeah, I really love that story, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's also thinking about, what do you envision for your family and for your child 3 to 5 years from now? Those things don't just happen overnight or automatically. It's just like planting those seeds now so they can grow.
When you talk about transforming toddlerhood, obviously the word transform has the root of change. So what are you trying to change? How is transforming toddlerhood different than other strategies out there?
Yes. So, what we're trying to change or shift is we're really about supporting parents and understanding typical child development and aligning their parenting tools and techniques with their child's development. So, their parenting tools can work with their development, not against it. So, we are really working to dispel the myth that toddlerhood is terrible, and we're transforming how parents are interacting with their toddlers, which then transforms their toddler's behavior and really transforming the overall experience of toddlerhood. Because as I said before, like toddlerhood has a very bad reputation and can absolutely be challenging, but it's a critical time for brain development and, quite frankly, a beautiful developmental period where so many firsts are happening. And it's actually there's so much beauty and so much magic. Like my 3-year-old just learned how to ride a bike without training wheels the other day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just, but so beautiful and so exciting. And I would never want to trade those first. But then 2 days ago, he's on the floor having a 30-minute meltdown because he didn't take a nap and he's overtired and it's 5 p.m. and he just can't even handle his life. Right. And so there's two faces to the developmental stage.
Well, I love thinking about the positive that because it's such a critical time, your return on investment is so great, right? Mm-hmm. Everything that we do well comes back in spades in their brain development for the rest of their lives, which is awesome. You said at the beginning that when you were a nanny, you started to realize that behavior is communication. So we need to learn this language. What are some ways that parents and caregivers can start to decode or translate their toddlers' behaviors?
Yes. So one thing that you want to understand is what is driving behavior, right? Your toddler is not just having a behavior, whether it's hitting, whether it's running away, whatever it might be, just to do it, right? It's not random behavior and it's not to push you over the edge or to make you hate your life or anything like that. Right? So what is actually happening here? Toddler behavior tells us a lot of things. It tells us about their level of brain development and maturation. It tells us a lot about their temperament and personality. It also is how toddlers get their needs met. A lot of toddler behavior is about meeting needs, whether it's their sensory needs, whether it's their basic needs like hungry, tired, need for connection to feel loved, or developmental needs, which is some of the things we had talked about, the need to exert their will, to experiment and explore, to feel capable, to have a role in the family, to feel powerful or have a sense of control. All of these things are so important to toddlerhood because it's their first foray into individualization, becoming their own individual. And so when we start to get curious what's behind the behavior, then we can start transforming it because we're looking at the root. For example, if you just put your kid in timeout because they hit, we have not taught our kid what to do next time they feel like hitting, and we don't know what triggered them to hit in the first place. So that's why we want to get curious about what is happening beneath the behavior so we can specifically address that and then teach other skills.
So let's talk about the hitting and the biting. How would you generally decode that in the absence of other information, obviously?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have a great chapter about this in my book that goes through all of the possible reasons why a toddler might hit or bite. It's actually both in the same chapter. And what's so interesting is that hitting often starts as experimenting with the world around them. So what will happen if I hit? How will people react? What will happen next? So it's very experimental in the beginning. But then kids also hit because they have big feelings. They might feel disappointed or frustrated. They also might hit because they feel overwhelmed by loud noises or too much excitement. Kids can also hit whenever they are tired. And so there's just so many different reasons why a child could hit. So it's just about getting to know. And if you don't know, because it's really about getting curious, right? And sometimes we need to track a behavior to start to see a pattern. So I always recommend tracking behavior. So if your toddler is hitting often, you want to just write down like the day, the time, what was happening in the 5 to 10 minutes before they hit, how you responded, and how your toddler reacted to your response. This is going to give you a lot of information to start seeing patterns, to start uncovering triggers, and then to start making a game plan to have it go differently. Maybe your toddler is having a meltdown every day and hitting because it's bath time, but they are just way too tired. So if you're moving bath time earlier in the day, that works. Or maybe you're trying to like serve dinner, but your child is way too hungry, so they're melting down right before dinner. You might want to have dinner happen a little bit sooner, right? So there's a lot of things that we can troubleshoot when we start to track the behavior.
Nice. I feel like, and some of those are like level one detective work, because really people of all ages get a little off when they're hungry, when they're tired. What's really specific to toddlerhood? Like you've talked about experimenting, asserting control, becoming their own self. Is that sort of this category where parents really need to just understand, like, this is normal. This is what my child's job is right now at this stage of life?
Yes, because not only is your child trying to become their own person, but they're constantly fighting against two other things. So they're fighting against this idea of having competing needs, right? Because as much as they want to be independent, they're still really reliant on adults to meet their physical and emotional needs, right? Like toddlers can't just go get their own meals and their own, give themselves their own bath and things like that. And they definitely need a lot of emotional support. So they're constantly fighting between wanting to be close and wanting to go adventure off. And that can be really frustrating and confusing for them. And then toddlers are also fighting against the fact that they have very little control over their lives. So imagine like figuring out that you're your own person and have like your own separate impact on the world, but then never really getting to make many decisions about how your life goes or how your day goes. You're told when to eat, when to go to bed, when to take a bath, what you're doing when you can play, when you have to clean up, when you have to do this. And so that can also create a lot of frustration for toddlers. And that's when we see them start to kind of, have these big behaviors to communicate their frustration or disappointment.
Makes total sense that's a super frustrating situation, and you don't have very good emotional regulation, and you don't have a very big vocabulary.
Right.
What are you going to do? You're going to use your body and your cries. I have a feeling that you have a really practical parenting toolbox tip for that very little control over their lives. Is there a way to give them like an inoculation of control to settle that need?
Yeah. Well, what I always like to tell parents is one thing we want to focus on is meeting our child's needs within our boundaries. So really taking a look at something and saying, okay, like where is my boundary on this? And then giving your child a sense of freedom or choices within your boundaries. So for example, this is a great example. Toddlers love playing in water, right? So say all of a sudden they've got their hands in like a cup of water that you were drinking or in the dog's bowl or something. And that can be super frustrating, right? And so we could be like, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? Stop that. You don't play with water, shut it down. But at the same time, we have an opportunity to meet their needs within our boundaries, which might look like, oh, hey, do you want to go play in the bathtub or help me wash these dishes, right? To give them like an opportunity to have that need to experiment with water, but within your boundaries. So offering choices between two things within your boundaries can be really great.
It's so empowering for the child. And they have no idea that, they're really arbitrary choices. Like, yes, like they have this sense of I have a choice.
Right.
My mom used to do that because I was a very obstinate toddler, preschooler, etc. And she would say, which outfit do you want to wear? This one or this one? So I didn't end up wearing tutus and galoshes everywhere. Right. But and that is that like another example of one of those easy choices where we can give them these little non-essential choices.
Exactly.
And then they feel better.
Yes, because the more opportunity we can do that, remember, it needs to be within your boundaries so you don't have your boundaries crossed. It's just such a great way to give that sense of control. And that's the whole premise of transforming toddlerhood, of how do you parent your child in a way that works with their development, not against it? Because we know that it's a developmental need to have a sense of control. Quite frankly, we all want to have a sense of control over our lives, but in toddlerhood, it's extremely pronounced. And then it's very pronounced again in the teen years, right? When they're
Sure
like
is.
becoming like the next level of like becoming an individual. And so that's when we look at tools like giving a choice between two things. And like I'll have parents sometimes say, well, is that even really a choice? I'm like, okay, yes, I know through your adult logical brain lens, right? Looking through this through a logical lens, it's like, this doesn't feel like a choice. But to a toddler who is just craving some control and has very little, it can make a big difference.
Oh, I love it. Love it. And I also love that you use the word boundaries, because I do think that's so important. You alluded earlier to parents. We just love our kids so much that sometimes it creates a permissiveness
Right.
in us. Like, oh, we just want to let them do what they want to do because it makes them happy. But boundaries are great and limits are important. So with toddlers, how do you set those boundaries, explain them, and keep them?
Yes. Well, I'm so glad you brought this up because as parents, we want to keep our kids happy. And it is, gosh, it's a hard parenting truth to say and accept that it's not our job to make our children happy. We actually, again, cannot control someone else's feelings and emotions. We can influence them, but we cannot control them. And so really, if our only goal is to keep our child happy, that's how we fall into the cycle of permissive parenting, because we then give the child all of the power and they're in control. So what we want to do is be in charge. And when we're in charge, we create connection, take their needs into consideration, but we also set clear limits, right? And so setting those limits is super important. And the biggest challenge parents have with this is they think that setting the limit is the last thing that you do. Like, I set the limit, we're good, which then comes back to what your daughter is saying, that, oh, these kids won't listen to me. Well, the younger that a child is, the more support they're going to need in following through on a limit. For example, say that you have a dog in your home and you have an 18-month-old who is just playing with the dog's tail and you're like, this is unsafe, right? And if you're just sitting on the couch and saying, oh, stop playing with the dog's tail, let it go, most likely your 18-month-old is not going to care and keep doing it. And so what toddlers need is us to help them follow through. So what that looks like is walking over and getting between the dog and your child, maybe even like moving your child back a little bit and saying, I won't let you play with the dog's tail. It's unsafe. Let's go over here and play, X, Y, and Z. And so that's a way to follow through on a limit and to help your child listen, because toddlers need us to support them. If you think you're just going to set a limit and then your toddler is going to comply, that's where most of the frustration comes from.
Right. Particularly through verbal use alone, because they're barely verbal. They're barely verbal. They barely have any, words for output. And you just let another really great parenting toolbox, kit item out of the bag, because in your example, you also distracted the toddler. Is that something you recommend parents do, is the fine art of distraction?
Yeah. So I think that it's really important to help our kids move on, right? And so one thing that I could have done differently in that example, because see, there is no one right way to do things. We could have also said, I won't let you play with the dog's tail. It's unsafe. And then you might say, when you want to pet the dog, you can pet them like this. And then you like model petting the dog in a safer area. So you want to teach kids skills, but also part of teaching skills is sometimes just helping your child move on. And so helping your child move on is looks like you moving on so your child can move forward too. And sometimes that is distraction. So that might look like going outside, right? Like your toddler's been having a tantrum. They've been having a hard time. They're having trouble getting out of it. Let's go outside and then start looking at about what we see outside, or let's turn on some music and get out the train set. Helping our children move forward can be super supportive. But if we use a distraction in the beginning part, like say your child's about to have a tantrum and you're like, here's my phone, here, don't cry. Or here, let's just get this toy off the shelf at the store, you can have it. To prevent a tantrum, now we're back into the permissive zone. And especially if we're distracting kids from their feelings and emotions with food, with screens, now we're setting up circuits in the brain that say, when I have a feeling like this, I should go grab some food or I should go grab a screen. And that's definitely not the pattern that we want to set up for kids.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Distraction is one tool, needs to be used at the right time, in the right way. So fantastic. You mentioned giving your child the power, and that's kind of what permissive parenting is. It gives the child all the power. What happens when we give toddlers power?
Yeah, here's the thing. Toddlers want power, right? They want a sense of control, but the problem is that they cannot be all powerful. And it actually is very scary and unnerving for them. So when toddlers have too much power, you're going to see behaviors escalate because toddlers are like, I don't know, like the movie Jurassic Park in a way, right? You have like the dinosaur, like the T-Rex or whatever, and they're like doing a perimeter check and like touching the fence, right? Looking for like the weak link in the fence to like escape, right? So toddlers are kind of the same way. They're looking for where the limit is and they're going to push up against it. But if they don't find the limit, they're going to keep snowballing and snowballing until they come up against that limit because basically if the vacuum is there, they're going to fill it. And so that can help toddlers feel too out of control and have their behavior really escalate and them to become very dysregulated. And so setting limits actually is supportive for toddlers in the sense that it gives them a sense of safety and security, even though they're going to protest at their lack of control. It's a very important part of toddlerhood for them to have limits to be within because it's just too much power otherwise.
I'm so happy that you explained that in that way. P.S. That applies to elementary kids, middle school kids, high school kids. If they don't have boundaries, whether it's with eating, I mean, I teach picky eating. If they don't have boundaries with eating, if they don't have boundaries with behavior, academics, bedtimes, screen time boundaries, they do begin to feel unsafe. And I firmly believe that's one of the reasons, root causes of the increase in anxiety that we see among our kids, because they don't know who's going to keep me safe. Who's going to stop me? No one stops me. I can do whatever I want. And that power is very scary. They're not ready for it.
Yes. And what's so interesting, I just love to comment on that. What's so interesting about this is like this fine line between we want to teach kids skills so they can be successful. And this is why the other end of the spectrum, instead of being the permissive pushover, the other end of the spectrum is the controlling commander, where it's like my way or the highway, compliance-based parenting, where the child's feelings, emotions, and needs are taken into consideration. It's hard for kids to learn skills in that way. And then they're being trained to always look for someone outside of them to set the container. So what's so interesting is that we're looking for this line between helping children learn the skills that they need to be successful in life and setting those limits and expectations to create that sense of security and safety. And that's why I created the recipe for effective discipline that is about creating connection, setting limits and following through, and teaching skills. I firmly believe you need all three of the ingredients in the recipe to have effective, healthy discipline so you can raise a child to have the skills that they need to be successful, but inside a container where you're holding the container until they're old enough to.
This is so fantastic. There's so many gems, like writer downers. I have a couple exclamation points after your line. It is not our job to make our children happy. Like that. Definitely. That's social media right there. Like, please, parents, please listen. But you talked about skills. And we haven't talked too much about that other than taking a little trash out. What are some of the most important life skills or skills for toddlers to learn? Like they're only 2, Devon. What can they do?
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, here's the thing. It's not that they're going to master a bunch of skills. I mean, don't get me wrong. Every day they're mastering all types of new, like fine motor skills, gross motor skills, all types of skills every day, speech and language skills. And the social emotional skills take a little bit longer, those more soft skills that you could say. But we're planting the seed for all of this in toddlerhood. So when we help maybe 2 siblings work through a problem or challenge that they're having together, we're teaching conflict resolution skills, especially when we show up as the coach, not the referee. Or let's say that we are helping our toddler not take a toy from a sibling, right? Now we're teaching impulse control when we're practicing child-led turn taking. So there's so many skills, even whenever we yell at our child and then we repair the relationship, we're teaching them relationship skills, right? And so there are so many skills that kids are learning every day through our parenting that is just so important for their future and what they're going to be doing in their lives.
Your analogy of the referee versus the coach, I think is critical too. And you could put those parenting terms. The referee would be that authoritative parent, right? Who's doing too much, who's taking control of everything. whereas the coach is the one sort of in the middle.
Yeah, the referee comes in and usually is saying someone's right, someone's wrong. And then it starts to set up these dynamics and roles. And I talk about this a lot in my book. I have a couple of chapters on siblings where, oftentimes then kids will be put into these boxes where one is typically like the victim and the other one is typically the, maybe like the aggressor or something like that. And then it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy that like sets this up for more and more sibling conflict. So when we come to it as the coach, where we're allowing both kids to feel seen and heard, we're not condoning any behavior, but we're allowing them to feel seen and heard, then we are, and working through the problems, through coaching them, we are actually helping them get more successful at their relationship in the future. So you can eventually work yourself out of the job. And that's what we want to do, but we have to do it, but we still have to hold the container as we're doing it.
Oh, amen to that. I will actually say to my older kids, I'll start like just saying something to them and I go, oh, wait, it's not my job to solve your problem. What ideas do you have? Like I literally like talk my parenting out loud sometimes because I'm human.
Yes, of course.
Devon, this is so good. So good. Honestly applies to toddlers. And as we've already talked about through elementary up through teens, a lot of these strategies, toddlers just, everything's a little bigger. Everything's a little newer and fresher with toddlers. But what about the fun part? What about the fun part of parenting toddlers when they're not pushing our buttons? What can we give our toddlers as parents in their exposure to and experience of the world?
Mm-hmm. Well, gosh, there are just so many things. I mean, I think that toddlers, I actually have a really beautiful list in the beginning of my book about things to love about the toddler years. And one of the things is that toddlers really love unconditionally. And it is so beautiful to see how excited they can be about celebrating someone's birthday or seeing a friend or even going to a farm and seeing animals. There's just so many moments where toddlers love to live in the present moment with so much love, and they can teach us so much about that. And I think that there's just a lot of beauty there. And then, as I was saying before, like all of the firsts, the first words, the first walking, first time, riding a bike. I'm even thinking like I love horses. So like the first time I took my son horseback riding, just so many beautiful firsts that we can experience. And the more that we give children the space to play, have unstructured play, to be out in nature, then the more we're going to see them blossom developmentally, because play is truly the work and the language of the first 5 years of life.
Oh, beautiful. I'm so glad you got there because I thought, oh, now we're supposed to take them horseback riding. We're supposed to go to the park. It's not about schedules.
No, nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Get them outside and let them be.
Yep, exactly.
Beautiful, beautiful. How much independence should toddlers have, though? I let them be outside. A lot of parents of toddlers, their hearts just went, I don't know about that. Like, how do we know where to set those expectations?
Yeah. So I think it's like looking at, I'm always thinking from a skills-based approach. So I'm always thinking, okay, instead of what punishment does my child need or what, we're thinking, what skill does my child need to learn to be successful here? What support does my child need here to be successful? And then we want to work on, scaffolding that skill. So whether that is getting dressed, right? Like helping them learn how to put on their socks and their pants and their shirt and their shoes, like just throwing clothes at your kid and being like, hi, like now you need to just get yourself dressed. That doesn't usually work. So we have to like start transferring the skill over to them to gain that independence. Same thing that I'm sure you see in the kitchen, right? You can't just be like, hi, here's all the ingredients. Have fun cooking, right?
Here's a sharp knife. Yeah, we don't.
We have to like scaffold and build the skills as we transfer them over. And so when we're thinking about independence, right? Like you could take anything like taking a bath, brushing teeth, making a bed, putting on shoes, riding a bike. It's about, okay, what is the next stepping stone that we need to master to get to the end outcome we want to get to and focus on that next step?
And I think maybe 40 years ago, the parents would have been more likely to throw the clothes at the child and say, get dressed. Mm-hmm. We have a little bit of the opposite problem now, don't you think, where we're putting the shoes on. And in fact, yesterday I was leaving the park and saw a dad tying the shoes of maybe a 7-year-old or so. Mm-hmm. And I was like, take the judgy pants off, Katie. Maybe they're just in a rush. I'm like, I'm hoping that child knows how to tie his shoes if dad keeps doing it for him. He'll never learn, right?
Well, that also comes back to what I said before about underestimating our child's physical abilities, right? So we end up doing a lot of stuff for kids, partially because we're underestimating their abilities, but partially because it's just oftentimes easier and faster for us to do it ourselves. So this is in our fast-paced world, it's so hard to slow down, but I really feel that it's imperative that we find small moments each day to slow down and give kids space to practice the skills that they need, because oftentimes when we have like very hurried, overscheduled lives, there's actually not a lot of time for kids to practice the things like tying their shoes, learning to use a knife in the kitchen, how to, fold laundry, match socks, things of that nature.
Yeah, I'm picturing, especially our homeschooling families with that. If you've got a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a toddler, you're thinking, oh my goodness, like, how can I possibly give the toddler the time they need? But remember that repetition is gold for them, right? So it's just maybe taking a minute and then reminding them, oh, practice, do that again. Can you do that again? Would you say that would be maybe a good thing for a toddler to be doing while the older sibs are at homeschool?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is the thing is it's all about finding what your toddler's interested in. So some kids are going to gravitate toward different tasks, different, interests. And so it's kind of seeing what is your child interested in and then getting them to do more of that. I think something else is when we're working with toddlers is the more senses we can engage, the better, because toddlers have, I didn't say this before, but like one of the myths or one of the challenges we have with toddlers is that people expect a toddler just to be able to sit for like 30 minutes. I have a table of attention spans in my book. And, for a 3-year-old, the average attention span's about like 8 minutes. So if you want your toddler to spend more time sitting in one place, we need to engage them in something that is interesting to them, that's like not too easy and not too hard for their skill level, and then engage more senses. The more senses you engage, the better, the more it kind of like hooks them in.
That is just so good. I'm imagining, being a parent of a toddler and just thinking that like I can use what I understand about my toddler's brain to make my day easier and his or her day better. Like it's a total win-win. So your son is Arlo. Yes. And I'm super curious to hear, he's 3, what he's done in the kitchen so far, right? Because I'm the kids cooking teacher. So this is your quiz.
Yes. Okay. So he loves pouring. Pouring. So we make a lot of pancakes. He's always wanting to make pancakes. We've kind of moved into waffles recently too, but that's like the number one thing, muffins, things like that. But he really loves pouring things, mixing things, starting to scoop things as well. So that's what he has the most proficiency in. He's not really interested in cracking eggs, which is really interesting. He's fine peeling like a hard-boiled egg, but he doesn't like his hands super messy, which is something we've like made great strides with since he was very young. But he's still not interested in cracking eggs, really. And now we're just starting to work on more knife skills because he's very interested in cutting things and needs a lot more technique.
Oh, that just makes my teacher heart a flutter. We'll get you into my class, but that'll be after the podcast. You mentioned he's got some sensory challenges with not liking to feel messy or sticky. And I smell a potential for a picky eater there with sensory challenges. Has he given you any troubles with feeding?
Yeah, he's definitely more on the picky side. When I think about like where we started with like feeding issues from day one with like oral motor issues and like sensory issues and restricted diet due to eczema, allergens and things like that, we have made great strides. And it's still challenging because toddlers are more selective by nature. And because of like having a restricted diet, there's like a lot of things. I feel like one of our biggest challenges are like ground meat textures or like quinoa, anything that's more like pieces of it, like, ground beef or like quinoa or something. And then also having things mixed together, combining things. He's not big into combining yet.
Super common. Love
Yep.
the word yet. That is also
Yet.
what I teach.
Right. Got to be hopeful here. Like it's yet. We're just not quite there yet.
Oh, so good. Devon is full of advice. You guys, if you're not following her on Instagram, you must at Transforming Toddlerhood. That's the title of the book as well, right?
Yes. Yep. Transforming Toddlerhood, how to handle tantrums, end power struggles, and raise resilient kids without losing your mind.
And I think I've seen that you have, is it maybe some bonus chapters on those crazy questions where you're like, oh my gosh, my 2-year-old just asked about death or where babies come from or why the skin color of his friend is different, and those are just like boulders dropping in on a parent's day. Like, I'm not ready for this.
Yes, it's
Any
so
quick
true.
tips, or should people just get those bonus chapters?
Yes. Well, first of all, that is like a bonus chapter that we have that if you pre-order the book, you can send us and that you listen to this podcast, you can send us a little email at hello@transformingtoddlerhood and you can get access to that bonus chapter. The biggest thing I want to say on this topic right now is that when the questions like this get dropped on us, we can feel like a sense of urgency, like, oh my gosh, we have to have an answer right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just like we feel a sense of urgency in so many other aspects of parenting. And a recurring theme throughout my book is how do we disrupt our stress response that gives us a false sense of urgency of having to respond right now, having to have the right answer. Because quite frankly, just because your toddler asks in this moment doesn't mean that you have to have an answer right now. What it means is that you are starting to understand where your child's head's at. And you can even get more curious and say, oh, thank you so much for asking. What other questions do you have about this? Or, getting more curious. And then you can also say, these are such great questions. I'm going to think about how to best answer them and I'll let you know. Right.
Mm.
And then you can come back in 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 days. It doesn't matter. And so I just think the biggest thing is, watch out for the false sense of urgency that tries to put a lot of extra stress and pressure on your parenting. And curiosity is always your best friend in just about any parenting situation.
And honestly, replace toddler with child or teen or, youth in that one. This is definitely a gem for all parents because at all ages, we have that sense of urgency. I have to answer this child's question or solve this teenager's problem or whatever it is. In the moment, that permission that you just gave parents to pause, to wait, to say, I'll get back to you on that. Gold. We all need that. Devon, I love to leave parents with a message of hope. And I do think this has been such a hopeful, encouraging conversation. But what do you want parents to remember most, to just tuck into our little hearts and walk away with?
Yes, I just have so many parents every day saying, oh, I'm so guilty of this. I'm so guilty of that. I just want every parent to know you are not guilty of anything except being a human being. And guess what? We are all human beings and we can't escape it. Our child does not need a perfect parent. They do not need a robot. They need a human being parent, which is what you are. So sometimes we're going to make mistakes. Sometimes we're not going to know the answer. Sometimes we're going to get frustrated and lose our patience. Sometimes we're going to be under-resourced and have, big feelings and unmet needs.
Ourselves,
Yes, right? Ourselves. And so it's okay. There's so much opportunity for learning and growth in the challenging moments. They're not problems to be fixed. And so just want to encourage everyone to embrace that growth mindset, to look out toward the horizon, not in the rear view mirror saying woulda, coulda, shoulda. Look to the horizon. Ask yourself, what did you learn? What are you practicing next time? And go out there and practice, because each and every moment is an opportunity to practice again. All you have to do is accept the invitation. So throw perfection out the window. Your children need a real human being, vulnerable, emotionally available parent.
You are a pro. Devon Kuntzman, everyone. Follow her on Instagram at Transforming Toddlerhood. You're exactly the voice that really we all need to hear. The new book is coming out in fall of 2025, also called Transforming Toddlerhood. But I mean, it kind of could be called Transforming Parenthood. There's a lot of your advice really spans the ages. So if you have toddlers, if you know someone who does, send them Devon's way so much. I feel like your Instagram is like what every parent needs because we want it in little bites. And that's how Instagram is designed, where it's like, oh, I can like process that today, and then tomorrow she can give me another tip. It's great.
Well, that's also how I wrote my book, surprising enough, is because I was like, I need to write a book that I can actually get through, because most parenting books are super long chapters. And I'm like, I know how exhausted toddler parents are. And so this book is 45 short chapters. So you can just flip to the challenge you're having, whether it's yelling, staying calm, setting limits, separation anxiety, tantrums, potty training, whatever it is, you flip to that chapter when you need it and get quick tools and answers on how to respond. So it's kind of like an Instagram compilation.
I love that. And it's actually not surprising, because you were probably writing it in quick snatches too while Arlo was napping or giving
exactly.
Oh my goodness. Transforming Toddlerhood, a beautiful brand, a beautiful book. Thank you so much, Devon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Healthy Parenting Handbook podcast. I hope your brain feels fed and your heart feels full, and that you feel connected, knowing that there are other parents on this journey with you. We're just trying to raise healthy, independent adults. And the next time you think, man, there is no handbook for this job, now there is the Healthy Parenting Handbook. Look up the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please leave a review, my friends, as that helps other parents who need this information to find us. And of course, subscribe. That's a huge help. You can also look for our shorts as a reel on Instagram at Katie Kimball Kids Cook, or subscribe to the Healthy Parenting Handbook Shorts channel on YouTube. You'll get those bite-sized portions of healthy parenting advice.